The air was thick with luxury and expectation. Camille Johnson walked into the SPA like she owned the world, because, in many ways, she did. A self-made business mogul with a multi-billion-dollar empire, she was the kind of woman who commanded respect without even saying a word. But what she didn't expect, as she crossed the threshold of that exclusive sanctuary, was the hostility waiting for her. The attendant at the entrance barely glanced up before blocking her path, her voice dripping with indifference. "Sorry, but this SPA doesn't serve people like you." The words hit Camille like a punch in the stomach. People like you? Was this a joke? She was one of the most powerful women in the business world, a black woman who had fought tooth and nail to climb the corporate ladder, shattering glass ceilings along the way. Yet here, in this space of supposed luxury, she felt small, invisible, and just when she thought it couldn't get worse, it did. Because what happened next would not only change the fate of the attendant, but would shake the very foundation of that SPA to its core. In just 15 minutes, everything would flip upside down. Curious? Hit subscribe, because what comes next isn't just about racism. It's about power, revenge, and the cost of underestimating someone you think you've already figured out. Camille had faced adversity her whole life. From the early days of working multiple jobs to pay for her education, to rising through the ranks of a male-dominated industry, she had encountered resistance at every turn. But none of it, had prepared her for the cold dismissal she faced in that moment. She walked into the luxurious SPA with the quiet confidence of a woman who knew she belonged there. With every step, she felt the comfort of familiar spaces, plush velvet, soft lighting, the hum of wealthy conversations, and the clink of expensive drinks. Yet there was something about this place that felt different. As soon as the attendant, a young woman, looked up at Camille, a flicker of recognition crossed her face. But instead of offering the usual professional greeting, the attendant's eyes turned cold. Without so much as a polite nod, she blocked the entrance with a stiff posture. It was as if Camille's very presence was unwelcome. "Sorry, ma'am," the attendant said, her voice flat and indifferent. "But this space is reserved for a specific clientele. We cannot let you in." The words hung in the air, thick with condescension. Camille's heart skipped a beat. Not because she was afraid, but because she understood exactly what was happening. She wasn't just being denied access. She was being erased. The attendant hadn't even looked at her. No acknowledgement, no inquiry, no attempt to verify her identity. She had already decided Camille didn't fit the mold of this world. "I am the owner of this place now," Camille thought, her mind racing. She had built an empire, piece by piece, from nothing. She had clawed her way to the top, earning every ounce of success. This SPA, this establishment, was hers. But in this moment, she felt like an outsider in her own domain. For a split second, the injustice of it all hit her. Her accomplishments, her power, her very presence. None of it mattered in the eyes of this young attendant. Camille felt the sting of being underestimated in a way that went beyond the ordinary. This wasn't just about privilege or access. This was about a woman being seen as less than, simply because of how she looked. She wanted to lash out. She wanted to scream, to demand an apology. She could have easily called her security or made a scene. But Camille wasn't that kind of woman. She had learned over the years that true power wasn't in the loudest voice or the strongest confrontation. No, it was in how you chose to respond. And Camille wasn't about to let this moment define her. She stood there for a moment, her heart racing, as the attendant continued to stare at her with that same empty expression. And then, with the quiet confidence that had brought her this far, Camille simply turned around. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. But as she walked away, her mind didn't stop. The words the attendant had thrown at her echoed in her head. "We cannot let you in." And it wasn't just the denial of entry that stung. It was the knowing that the woman who had just tried to dismiss her hadn't seen her. Not really. Camille wasn't just another woman on the street. She wasn't some stranger to be ignored. She was Camille Johnson. And And this was far from the end. As she stepped out of the SPA's ornate glass doors and into the cool air of the city, Camille didn't let the sting of rejection linger. Instead, she focused on something bigger. This was just the beginning. The world had underestimated her before, and every time that had happened, she had come back stronger. This time would be no different. The real fight was about to begin, and Camille wasn't backing down. Don't miss what's coming next. Hit subscribe now because what's about to unfold will leave you speechless. Camille stood there, the cold air biting at her skin as she walked away from the SPA, the sting of the rejection still sharp in her chest. But she didn't let her emotions take control. She didn't waste time feeling insulted or hurt. No, she was past that. Camille knew this moment was about more than just an unwarranted dismissal. It was a chance to turn the tables, to make a statement. She could already picture the manager behind the scenes, probably sitting in his polished office, surrounded by his comfortable routine, oblivious to the storm brewing outside. He had no idea that Camille Johnson, a woman he had likely written off as just another client, had the power to make or break his business. And today, she was about to make him see that. With calm precision, Camille pulled out her phone and dialed the number for the SPA's management team. As the phone rang, she felt the cool confidence settle over her, like armor. This was no longer about what had just happened. It was about asserting her authority, about showing them the kind of power they couldn't dismiss. The line clicked, and a smooth, almost too polished voice answered. "Yes, Ms. Johnson," the manager said, trying to keep the tremor out of his voice. "How can I help you today?" Camille didn't mince words. "I was just turned away at the entrance of your SPA by an attendant who clearly believes that people like me don't belong here. I want this resolved immediately." There was a beat of silence on the other end of the line, and Camille could almost hear the manager's breath catch. He had no idea what was coming. "If you don't take action right now," she continued, her voice calm but unwavering, "I'll not only take my business elsewhere, but I'll make sure you lose millions in contracts. I'm well connected, and I have the means to make sure this story reaches every corner of the industry." The manager's confidence faltered. He had been in charge for years, had managed multi-million-dollar accounts without breaking a sweat. But this was different. Camille's name carried weight, far more than he had realized, and now it hung in the air between them like a threat. I'll handle this immediately," he stammered, his calm facade slipping away as panic began to set in. The realization that a single mistake could unravel everything he had worked for was sinking in. He had thought he was untouchable, that no one would ever dare question his authority. But Camille wasn't just another customer. She was a force, a woman who had clawed her way to the top and wasn't about to let anyone forget it. He could feel the sweat trickling down his back, his pulse quickening as the weight of his words hit him. This was no longer a simple customer complaint. It was a crisis waiting to happen. "You'll have a resolution within the hour, Ms. Johnson," he said, his voice now betraying a clear sense of urgency. "I'll personally handle it." Camille hung up the phone without another word, her mind already calculating her next steps. She didn't need to say more. The manager knew exactly who he was dealing with now, and Camille wasn't about to back down. As she walked away, her thoughts were clear. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about the attendant. This was about making a statement that said no one would ever underestimate her again. The manager was about to learn what it meant to cross someone who had been written off her entire life. And Camille wasn't about to let him forget it. This was just the beginning. What happened next was a sharp reminder of how quickly things could turn, and how quickly power dynamics could shift when the right person decided to take control. 15 minutes later, Camille walked back through the doors of the SPA. This time, however, the air felt different. The energy had shifted entirely. The manager, once confidently insulated in his position, now stood outside the entrance, his every step heavy with an unmistakable tension. He was no longer the powerful figure in charge. He was the man who had just made the biggest mistake of his career. As Camille approached, he rushed toward her with a nervous, almost frantic urgency. His posture was different. His back wasn't straight anymore. His steps weren't confident. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a palpable fear that echoed in the way his voice cracked slightly when he spoke. "Ms. Johnson, please accept my sincerest apologies for the behavior of my attendant," he said, his tone now humble, his voice soft and pleading. I had no idea who you truly are. Please come in. The SPA is yours." His words hung in the air, an attempt at reparations, but Camille's sharp gaze made it clear that a simple apology wouldn't cut it. She had learned long ago that apologies from people like him were often nothing more than empty words, intended to smooth over mistakes without addressing the root of the issue. She stood still for a moment, letting the tension stretch between them, before finally speaking. "You're right about one thing," she said, her voice steady, unshaken, and deliberate. "This SPA is now mine." The manager's face drained of color. He had expected an apology to fix things, perhaps a chance to smooth over the situation. He hadn't anticipated the complete shift in the power dynamic. "But not just because of your apology," Camille continued, her voice gaining strength. "I'll be removing all of my accounts from your establishment, and I'll be bringing with me a network of investors you didn't even know I had." Her words hung like a hammer, ready to fall. "Be prepared to lose millions." The manager staggered backward as if physically struck. His pride had taken a massive blow, and in that moment, Camille saw the full weight of his realization. The luxury he had always taken for granted was now slipping through his fingers. The empire he had built was on the brink of crumbling. He knew it was too late to undo his mistake. He had underestimated her. He had thought she was just another wealthy client, another face in a sea of elite customers. But Camille Johnson was far more than that. She wasn't just wealthy. She was powerful, and she had the means to make his world come crashing down. As he stood there, rooted to the spot, his mind raced, trying to formulate the right words to salvage the situation. But Camille wasn't waiting for him to come up with a solution. She had already made up her mind. She had already seized control of the situation. The power was now in her hands. "Don't bother," she said coldly, turning away. "Your apology is as empty as your promises. You had your chance, and you lost it." And with that, Camille walked past him, heading straight for the door. As she passed, she could feel the weight of the manager's stare, the crushing reality setting in. He was powerless now. Her words had sealed his fate. The SPA that had once been his domain now stood as a symbol of everything he had misjudged, an exclusive establishment, a place of luxury and power, but now marked by his own downfall. Camille wasn't looking back. She didn't need to. She knew her worth, and now so did they. What started with a single act of dismissal had become her declaration of authority. It wasn't just a victory over one man, it was a statement to the world. Never underestimate the strength of a woman who has nothing to lose. Irreparable loss. The moment Camille walked away, the manager's world began to unravel. He stood frozen in the doorway, watching her figure disappear into the distance, her silhouette a sharp contrast to the chaos now brewing behind him. His heart raced. His palms were clammy. The phone in his hand felt suddenly foreign as he fumbled to dial numbers he knew by heart, desperately seeking someone, anyone who could help him undo the damage. But it was too late. Within the first few minutes of his frantic calls, the weight of the situation began to settle in. Camille wasn't just any client. She wasn't a high-profile guest who could be appeased with a discount or a show of sincere regret. She was a network of influence, power, and wealth that far exceeded the immediate grasp of his establishment. The realization hit him like a wave, crashing into his chest and stealing the air from his lungs. The SPA, once a symbol of elite luxury, was now staring down the barrel of an imminent collapse. Camille had made her decision, and there was no reversing it. She wasn't simply taking her business elsewhere. She was dismantling the very foundation the manager had worked so hard to build. Every high-profile account, every lucrative contract, gone. In their place, a trail of destruction Camille would leave behind, her influence spreading like wildfire through the circles that mattered. His desperation deepened as his phone buzzed with texts and emails, clients who were already pulling their business, worried whispers growing louder with each passing minute. Camille's words had been a death sentence, and he knew it. He rushed into his office, pacing with an energy born of panic. His mind reeled. He couldn't think. He couldn't breathe. The empire he had worked so hard to create was crumbling, and it was all his fault. All because he had failed to see the woman standing before him. All because he had dismissed her. As Camille's car disappeared into the distance, he turned back to face the building, its opulent facade now a cold, indifferent structure. No longer a symbol of prestige, it felt like a tombstone, one that marked the end of a legacy. His pride, his arrogance, had cost him everything, and there was no apology large enough to fix it. No amount of charm, no pleasantries, no emergency meetings could undo what he had just lost. The weight of his failure pressed down on him like a ton of bricks. His life, as he knew it, was shifting in real time, and the loss wasn't just professional, it was personal. He had failed to see Camille for who she truly was, and now he was left to reckon with the consequences. And as the hours dragged on and the phone calls continued to spiral out of control, the manager realized just how irrevocable the damage was. Camille wasn't just an obstacle he had to navigate, she was a lesson, one he would never forget. Never underestimate someone, especially when they've been forced to prove their worth. As for Camille, she wasn't concerned with the fallout. She had already moved on, her mind focused on what truly mattered. The spa's loss was just the beginning of something bigger. For Camille, this was about more than just one bad experience. It was about shifting the power, reclaiming control, and ensuring that people like the manager would never again make the mistake of thinking she was disposable. And so, as the manager scrambled in his office, trying to stitch together what remained of his empire, Camille stepped into her future, leaving behind the ruins of a world that had once underestimated her. The echoes of Camille Johnson's actions reverberated far beyond the walls of that once exclusive SPA. What had seemed like a small, isolated moment, the dismissal of one woman, had become a full-fledged revolution. In the days following her return, whispers of what had transpired spread through the business world with lightning speed, each retelling painting Camille not just as a victim of arrogance, but as a woman of unmatched resolve and power. The SPA's reputation, once synonymous with luxury and sophistication, crumbled under the weight of Camille's influence. What had been a momentary lapse of judgment by the attendant had spiraled into a catastrophic loss for the entire establishment. The manager, who had once prided himself on his unassailable position, found himself publicly humiliated. Clients he had counted on for years pulled out, contracts dissolved, and investors began to distance themselves, unsure of the long-term viability of a business that had failed to recognize the value of its clients. His credibility evaporated overnight. But Camille? She didn't just walk away with the satisfaction of seeing her point proven. She walked away with something far more powerful: control. Control over her narrative, control over her identity, control over the direction of her career, and most importantly, control over how she would be treated moving forward. For Camille, this wasn't just about a moment of victory. It was about a fundamental shift in the way she saw herself and the way the world would see her from then on. The power of her voice had broken through the noise of an industry that often overlooked the quiet strength of women like her. In one calculated, unwavering stand, she had shown that no one, no matter how powerful or influential, could diminish her worth or silence her presence. The manager had thought his words were enough to dismiss her. But Camille had proven that words, when backed by conviction and purpose, could create ripples that could tear down empires. She had taken back the narrative, reshaping it into a powerful testament of resilience and self-determination. And as the world watched the fallout unfold, Camille's name was cemented in the minds of many as a symbol of something more than business acumen. She was a reminder that no one, no matter their position, no matter their power, should ever be allowed to dictate the worth of another. This wasn't just a victory for Camille. It was a victory for anyone who had ever been underestimated, dismissed, or belittled. It was a powerful reminder that sometimes the greatest strength lies in standing firm and saying, "I am enough." Camille Johnson had not only reclaimed control over her own destiny, but she had shifted the balance of power in the room. She had made sure that the world would never forget her, and in doing so, she reminded everyone that respect, once earned, could never be taken away. Subscribe for more stories that challenge the limits of audacity and personal triumph. Don't miss out.